think. When the kids finally go back to school full time, you'll have deep time at home, totally uninterrupted to do your work. And that's like, I remember when we went remote, I had my entire day's work done in like 3 hours that I normally took me all day to do because people were interrupting me. I was always having meetings, or like people just wanted to chit chat. And I suddenly was able to do so much more. I was now doing the work 3 times the work that I would normally do. And so, these things have kind of been important. So as employees have learned, this is awesome. The next thing is that employers are saying, some are saying it's awesome, let's keep it, how do we make it work? Yep. Some are saying, well, that's not how we do it in my day. I want people back in the office. And they're finding out that their talent is ready to pack their bags. They're ready to clean out their desk and go. And it's not just a general talent, it's some of their best talent.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. This past year, as we all know, has taught us many lessons and continues to teach us many challenges, of course, as we know over the last year, but also many opportunities, and the best teams and organizations and leaders right now in the world are the ones that are stepping back and thinking about how can they be smarter and to care for the people around them and think about how they bring about the culture they are creating together with their people. I'm more convinced of this than ever, that authentic leadership and compelling cultures are needed more in the world than ever in the world that we're in today. So thanks to everyone out there, whoever's been a loyal listener from day one, thanks to you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Glad you're jumping in. Hope you go back and check out some of the old episodes. As always, thank you to everybody out there who shares, who rates it 5 stars, of course, who leaves a nice review, all of those ways. I hate asking for that, but these are the ways in which the algorithms work and help us amplify these messages further into the world. So anyone that takes an opportunity to do that, we sincerely appreciate that. I am super excited for our guest that I'm inviting in just a minute. Chris Dyer is the founder and CEO of People G2, which is a fully remote organization that has been listed as a best place to work and recognized as one of Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies. He hosts his own podcast, which is how he and I connected even in the first place. We've done a number of different interviews on his podcast, and now I'm really excited to welcome in here and share him with the Thermostat podcast. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a thought leader, and his newest book, Remote Work, launches tomorrow. Remote Work, and I've got copies coming my way. Chris is holding up a copy right there. My copies are already in the mail. I got an email saying they're coming my way. I'll say more about that here later. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to connect. I know you and I love talking company culture, and in fact, your first book, The Power of Company Culture, we've talked a whole lot about that again on your podcast and me being a guest there, but excited about the new book. And I know, personally from, writing books and launching, no matter how many times you've done it, it is an exciting and nerve-wracking, and you really hope it goes well. So how you doing with the launch of the book tomorrow?
Well, like you said, you never really know. I mean, you get the word out, you try to do everything you can, and you hope people, that you've written something people want to read about, and that, once that first wave of people read the book, fingers crossed they like it, and maybe they tell their friends. So, it's always, we'll see what happens. The first book, when I wrote that one, it was like, well, I don't know if anyone's going to read it. It was fun. I wrote it, it's done. I can say I wrote a book. Like stamp done. Like if no one ever reads it, oh well. Like that was sort of a little more zen about it. And then, it went really well and was a bestseller. And so it was just kind of rode that wave. And so now it's like, well, now that one did well, I expect this one to do well. And there's a little different pressure, I think, this time.
Well, you've got a whole lot of people that are cheering for you and know that it'll be a success. And again, I know it's a big deal just to put your thoughts down and to release it out in the world and to be willing and vulnerable enough to share it with people. So that's what's awesome about when people then jump in and then do celebrate it and get it and share it and all those things. So congrats to you. I know it's a lot of work. So congrats to you and glad to chat about it. So let's talk about remote work, the book. Why'd you write it? And give me kind of the elevator speech of why is this important in the world right now? I mean, obviously this is coming out at a pretty opportune time for this discussion around remote work, but why'd you write it? And what's the heart of the book?
So, what's fascinating, I think, is that I started writing this with my co-author, Kim Shepard, before COVID happened, before the pandemic started. We were approached by my previous publisher and they said, we really want you to write another book. And I said, I have two fingers on two different hands and I'm not ever writing another book. You can guess what I was giving, which finger I was holding up and saying, I don't have time. Yeah. And they go, well, if you did write one, what would you write about? And I go, well, I would write about remote work because that is the thing I'm most passionate about besides culture that I wish people were talking more about. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, why don't you write one on that? And I went, and of course they got me, right? I mean, it's the one thing I would write about that they got me. So we started planning to write the book, and then the pandemic happened. And so we actually kind of completely did a 180 and said, this book needs to be about the stories of different companies that whatever happened to them, whatever their journey was, what's that story that they have that's important to know about remote work? So I have my story about my company. My co-author has her story. So I started mine because you have the global recession, the global financial crisis in 2009. Yep. She started hers because of 9/11. Yep. It was a response to the change in business then. And so we had big companies like Cornerstone On Demand and AMN Healthcare that had to suddenly do a remote thing when that was not their strategy before. And what were the lessons they learned? How did they do it, right? These are big company examples. And then we said, well, who's really good at training people in the remote world? And the answer shocked us. It's the U.S. Marine Corps. They're the best at training people remotely because they have to get people up to speed, get them certifications, have them learn things, very complicated things about maybe using a particular piece of machinery or executing a plan, and they can't practice it and do it together. They generally are spread all across the world, and then they have to prepare, and then they come together, and they're together for like a few days, and then it's time to go do the thing. Yeah. And so they've gotten very, very good at training people through a remote structure. And it was like, I would never have thought of that, right? So there's great lessons out of there. We pulled in lessons from nonprofits. And so we tried to give people a really good cross-section, right? I've read 1,000 books that, it's what Google did. And you can learn a few things from them, but like, I'm not Google. I don't have that many employees. I don't have that many sexy programmers or that much money in the bank. Like, there's only so much I can learn from them. Mm-hmm. So that was really our thought process: is how do we share what we know, the best things that we think that make remote work, and how can we demonstrate that across lots of different companies?
I love it. And I love that approach, and I love that. That's interesting what you say about the Marine Corps. I mean, that when you say it that way, of course, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. The ability to plan and have to bring people up to speed and to engage them. Right. The information sharing and preparation for where they're going, that makes a whole lot of sense. And obviously, companies now of all different sizes and shapes, that remote work is so important, and entering into the culture that now places are creating, whether that's a hybrid, whether that's fully remote work, or whether that's then bringing people back into the office. The remote working element is now a part of almost every organization and company. And so how you, the values that you have as a company, and how you view and see and honor that kind of remote work experience, I believe is going to be significant to how you attract, how you retain, develop, and certainly leading to performance. And of course, over the pandemic, there was that kind of forced innovation that took place, is that all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and places, that had been tipping their toe in the water of remote work, or been thinking about it for a while, all of a sudden were forced to innovate and forced to not just tip their toe in, go all in. So, what have we learned? I know many things, and I'm sure the book is full of those things, but what do you think? What have you observed about what we've learned about remote work just in the last year?
So the first and most important thing that we've learned is that it can work, right? And it can work at scale, and it can work for most organizations in most places. Now, of course, if you're making wine in the vineyard, you got to be in the vineyard, right?
Right.
Someone picking the grapes, the winemaker making the wine in the vats and all that. That's not ever going to be remote, I guess, unless there's some new wave of technology, unless somebody's pushing buttons and watching robots do it. But like right now, that's right. So not everyone can be remote. Our frontline workers couldn't be remote. But for those of us that can be, and we did, people realized it could really work. And so that was the biggest obstacle, right? Was getting senior leadership to understand that, yes, people will do their work. Yes, people will be
happy. They
won't
just take naps and not show up. Yeah, that they'll actually do their work, and they'll actually be, yeah. Okay.
And so what's happened is employees have realized, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit in traffic for 2 hours a day. I don't have to drive. I don't have to sit on a horrible train or a metro or a bus with a bunch of people coughing and sneezing. And the worst things of society are generally found inside your commute, and it's like, so we've eliminated that. I get to see my family more. Once COVID sort of lifts, you're going to be able to see your friends more. You're going to be able to do all of these things at a better level, and you can get deep time to think. When the kids finally go back to school full time, you'll have deep time at home, totally uninterrupted to do your work. And that's like, I remember we went remote. I had my entire day's work done in like 3 hours that I normally took me all day to do, because people were interrupting me. I was always having meetings, or like people just wanted to chit chat. And I suddenly was able to do so much more. I was now doing the work 3 times the work that I would normally do. And so, these things have kind of been important. So as employees have learned, this is awesome. The next thing is that employers are saying, some are saying it's awesome, let's keep it. How do we make it work?
Yep.
Some are saying, well, that's not how we do it in my day. I want people back in the office. And they're finding out that their talent is ready to pack their bags. They're ready to clean out their desk and go. And it's not just a general talent, it's some of their best talent is ready to leave. And so employers are faced and are going to be faced to this fact: am I willing to lose like up to 33% of my employee base in a very short period of time? And probably 60 to 70% of those are my top performers. Am I willing to lose them? And am I willing to go and replace them and spend all that time and money? Because that's just not how we do things here. We like to collaborate inside the office, all that BS, right? Instead of finding new ways to collaborate, which our book will help you with. How do you collaborate? How are you creative? How do you brainstorm when you're not sitting in the same office, right?
Yep.
And
I have no doubt that there will be time in the near future, I'm not sure when, but where there will be power in congregating again, power in bringing your whole team together, your entire company and organization together in one space for that powerful keynote speech, that discussion that has to happen as a team, an entire organization about leadership and culture and mindset. But until then, we are in a virtual world. And so if I can add value to your team, your company, or organization through a virtual keynote speech, or just helping your team and organization have the conversation that's the currency for change that you need to be having internally, I hope you'll track us down and let us know how we can be helpful at jasonvbarger.com.
And you brought this up about the innovations, right? Mm-hmm. There was so many people that didn't know how to use Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts or whatever, and now they do.
Yep.
Sort of like how nobody knew how to use Microsoft Word and Excel when it first came out. People got training, and suddenly now it was just expected that you know how to do this stuff, right? And so that has happened. And so there's going to be another disruption coming, I think, this year, unless COVID comes back or something and puts us back at home. But there's going to be a big disruption in talent, and that's going to be really fascinating to watch, is what kind of musical chairs happens, and how do employers handle that, and will it just be, could it even be an economic disaster? I mean, could companies go out of business because they can't hire anybody because they're not willing to offer remote work?
I think it's going to be fascinating, just as you described. I think the next couple of years are going to be fascinating to see as we negotiate and figure out what the workforce, obviously what they want to do, but then also companies and how they approach this. And certainly the culture, you and I both on that again, and so much of the work that I'm doing within teams and organizations is helping them think proactively about the strategy on the culture that they're trying to create into the future. And so remote working and how we're creating and engaging people, creating, specific times where we can certainly have that power of congregation, because I think till the end of time, there's always going to be power in us congregating in the same space together, but not all the time. And so how do we also learn better tools and ways in order to leverage the technology that exists, so that, you can be on the West Coast and I can be on the East Coast, and we can do this, and how fascinating that is. And as we learn how to engage truly with one another, we can have as effective as a meeting doing this as we are sitting in this. I love sitting in the same space. And again, there's power in congregation of an entire company, entire team, all in the same space. But the reality is, we know we can't do that every day, nor should we do that every day.
Right.
So I'm interested also that there's, the research around, because there are a lot of companies that are, again, wrestling with this. How do we bring people back? How do we do this hybrid? How do we continue to retain those people, that 33% or whatever that you just alluded to, that may say, hey, I want to stay doing this, or I'll go somewhere else. What are some of the KPIs or the measurements related to that, of how we're beginning to able to tell that narrative around to somebody that might be skeptical of, hey, remote work, people are just laying around on their couches and they're not going to be as effective doing that? What's some of the research showing?
Well, the research has already shown that there was a huge uptick in activity, that going remote, actually we had more calls being made, more tickets being dealt with, more entries into the CRM. I mean, that doesn't necessarily translate into performance or profit, but certainly from a productivity standpoint, if we just look at that alone, it's very easy to see that the metrics all went up. And so what we saw was, and this was something was part of the case study about Cornerstone on Demand, what we saw is their sort of categorization of people was very accurate across many other organizations, including mine, which was people who were living by themselves because they were just, it was just them in like an apartment or a house during quarantine, or people who had just one other person in their house. Could have been a spouse, could have been a partner, could have been a friend, whatever. Yeah. That they were bored and they were super productive. They were overworking. They were doing everything, right?
Yep.
And so the support that the organization had to give to those people, that had to give those people was to slow down, was to have meetups, was to have Beer Friday, was to have trivia on Thursday, was to get them connection, right? To get them, talking to each other and having the social interaction.
Yep.
Later on, when COVID goes away, you can get your social stuff somewhere else.
Yep.
My organization, we only got together once a year around the holidays, had our big company party. We did trainings. We did a couple of days of fun stuff. And that lasted us a whole year. And that filled up our cup enough. And we did not need to see each other again until the next year. Now, we sometimes did certain sales and certain people, we would run into each other, different things. But for most people, once a year was enough because we did enough other things inside the organization.
Yeah.
What companies really need to think about is creating signposts. So the reason that working inside an office is easy for us is if we're in one place, we can see what's happening and we know what's kind of going on, as long as you're sitting at your desk or you're walking around or whatever, right? So let's say, I know that you have to go talk to my boss, Sally, right? Before I can go talk to Sally about the next part of the project. Right. Well, I see you walk over to Sally's office and you have a meeting with her, and then you leave. And then I know today I got to pop in there when I have time or schedule a meeting and say, hey, I know you talked to Jason. How are we on the project? Can we launch it now? Cool. With clear signposts, right?
Yeah.
That is gone in remote.
That's right.
Gone.
That's right.
If you have a one-on-one meeting, you and Sally talk, and you don't tell me, right. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
And so that's why people think it's hard to collaborate, or it's hard to brainstorm, or it's hard to, so what you should have done is invited me to the meeting. In a remote world, you would have never had that meeting, just the two of you. You would have invited me and anyone else who needs to be in there. Maybe you two would have talked directly to each other for just a moment and ignored the rest of us, but made your decisions and then said, okay, now how do we implement Chris? Now how do we do the next thing? And we would have had one meeting together. Or we use a, brainstorming board, or, there's mind mapping. There's all these cool technologies out there. And you would have gone in and documented that you two had the meeting, and I would have known, or you would have Slacked us or something, right? The new signpost.
Yep.
I am convinced that everything that's good and everything that's bad in our world as for human beings is based on a system. It's based on a good system or a bad system. You want to look at why there's so much, problems with racism and communities that are dealing with the police and all. It's a bad system, right? That's what people are talking about, is how do we change the system so that doesn't continue to happen. If you look at a culture, it's generally bad systems. They don't meet correctly. They don't have, respect for their teammates. Their bosses show up late to every meeting. There's bad systems. And if you look at the great companies, they're thinking about all these wonderful things. They're talking about, you can look up my pillars in my first book, transparency and positivity. But none of those things mean anything if you just put them up on a wall and there isn't a system in place to make it happen.
That's right.
And so that's my elevator pitch for why you should buy the book, is because we talk about what all of those little systems are, what are all these little tips and tricks and things that you can do to meet better, collaborate better, make people feel heard, make sure that information gets moved around the organization. And honestly, when you have a good culture and you have some good systems in place, which isn't easy to do, I'm not promising it's easy.
No, of course not.
But you'll be better. You'll be better than your competitors who are working in the same office.
No doubt about it. I say all the time that culture is your competitive advantage. And so, again, if people aren't it doesn't mean your culture is perfect, but if your culture isn't progressing and continuing to grow and develop and the ecosystem isn't healthy, then people will go somewhere else. And what I've observed is directly in line with what you were just saying. But what with across the teams and organizations that I support, what I've noticed is we're having to develop those systems and the new habits of just how we even have virtual meetings. And so your example of you got to invite them to the meeting seems like an obvious thing, but the reality is we had to stop and kind of retrain ourselves that, wait a second, we have an opportunity to just get everybody on the screen and everybody in front of us that needs to be a part of this conversation. And we need to have that conversation. And then the other thing we started to do, though, is exactly what you described. And I heard this and saw this across companies, is that then, because there was no travel time, which everybody enjoyed, but then unfortunately we went the other direction and we just started lining up all these virtual meetings on top of each other. And so then people were just jumping from Zoom meeting or Teams meeting to Teams meeting and burning themselves out. And because they were at home, they felt like they could never get away from work and they'd work all day. And so all of a sudden we had to train new ways of thinking and realizing this isn't good. That's not the culture that we want to create. We can be more effective and productive. And so actually, it just means we need to then be intentional about how do we build in time to connect with one another? How do we build in time to make sure that we're having those, so that the words aren't just on the poster on the wall, like you said, for our culture, but they are getting anchored throughout everything we do in the systems we create for how we think, act, and interact every single day throughout our ecosystem, whether we're in person or whether we're spread around the world. We're all still connected to that. But to your point, we're still training and developing, and I believe cultures are still negotiating that together of, wait, how are we committed to doing this work together?
Yeah, and I think it's really important if your listeners think about any meeting that they're in, whether it's remote or not, but especially when you're remote and hybrid. Ask yourself the question, who else should be in this meeting? Who else might benefit from knowing this? Because they could learn something new, because they're going to be in charge of doing the next thing that's going to happen out of this discussion. Whatever it is, if the answer is clear, there should be other people, then you need to get them in that meeting. I am so adamant about this concept that we should stop having one-on-one and one-on-two meetings. It needs to stop, especially when you're remote, especially if you're hybrid, right? Again, if you're in an office, I can see that you're going to go talk to someone. It's a little easier, but even in that situation, it's still better. You look at the Scrum and Agile and Kaizen, all these systems, they all reinforce groups coming together very quickly for very short periods of time to talk, to discuss, get everyone on the same page, get different ideas and perspectives, and then move forward, right?
Yep.
Because two people don't generally come up with as many good ideas and solutions as five people. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't have 10 people and you can't have 15 people, but 5 to 7 people are a really good number to get people together and go, in my old company, when we had this issue, we got this other software, and that's all. Anyway, oh, really? That happened? But those kind of things don't happen in one-on-one. Yep. The other things I need to think about doing is always remember Parkinson's law. This will save you so much grief. So Parkinson's law says if you set an amount of time to do something, it tends to take you that amount of time to do it.
Yep.
So so people go, well, what does that mean? Imagine you're going to go and clean your garage this weekend, right? And you say, I have 2 hours to clean the garage before I have to leave for a party or something. Well, guess how long it's going to take you to clean the garage?
2 hours.
2 hours. You have just told your brain for 2 hours. And so your movements and what you decide to clean and to do will all be predicated on this idea that you need to fill those 2 hours. You're not going to do less. Yep. You're not going to suddenly be done in 30 minutes and go, well, I guess I have an hour and a half to go watch TV. Your brain just doesn't do that.
Yep.
But if you say, you know what? I have 2 goals. Number 1, can I do this in 30 minutes? Could I clean the garage in 30 minutes instead of 2 hours? I might ask my family for help. I might hire the neighbor kid to come and help move stuff around for me faster. I might prioritize what needs to be cleaned and maybe not do everything, but just do some of it today. So can I squash that down? And if you can't squash it down, if you're like, well, there's so much to do, can you work to end early? So in all of our meetings, our goal should be to end early.
Yep.
So if you book a 30-minute meeting or you book an hour meeting, which an hour meeting should be pretty rare, in my opinion, in most organizations. 15-minute meetings and 30-minute meetings should be the norm. Can we end early? Because you will notice if you give people that goal, they start to move a little faster. They talk a little more succinctly, a little more intentionally. We remove all the BS of what did you do this weekend and what are your kids up to and all this stuff, right? You can throw it at the end if you really want it. But you get really intentional about being effective. I mean, we take pride in it. With 15-minute meeting and we hit 8 minutes and we're done and we go, hey, everyone, enjoy the gift of time. We cheer. We're like, yeah, we did that in 7 minutes. Or here's 7 minutes to go do something. Go do anything you want. Go walk the dog. Go move the laundry. Go meditate. I don't care. Like, I'm not asking you to go do more work. It's your time to go do what you need. And it is so empowering for people, right? And so to your point, we're eliminating all those meetings. We're not back to backs.
Yep.
I had a guy the other day tell me that he has 5 one-on-one meetings on Mondays. One with CFO, CEO, COO, CPO, and I forget the other C. There was some other person, right, that he has to meet with. Yeah, maybe it was a CIO, right? And they have a one-on-one every week on Monday. So that means on his Monday, he spends 5 hours back to back. I mean, they're like maybe broken up by lunch, but he spends 5 hours just meeting with these people. He gets no work done. He says every Monday night he's up till late because he's got to get all his other work done. And people are still getting him. And so I said to him, why don't you have all that meeting with everybody at one time? Aren't they meeting with each other too? And he goes, yeah. So we just saved 5 to the power of 5, however many hours that is. I forgot how to do that in math. Is that 125? Or is that, it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And they all started doing the meetings together. And he said it's the most, he can't believe that they never thought of it this way. Right? They never, because you could have the occasional need to really talk to someone one-on-one and I'm very confident. Fine, do that when you need it.
Yep.
But so they did a longer meeting. They did a 2-hour meeting once a week with all 5 of them together.
Well, and it goes the other way too. It goes the other way too, because what I see is teams and companies that that have the group meeting, and then they try to cover all this stuff that really is a you and I meeting, and so it goes both ways. That we have to flex our muscles and getting better at as leaders, understanding when is it that one-on-one touch point where it is a conversation that's the currency for change. It's a courageous conversation, the one you and I are having together, a support or a coaching conversation or something that's happening in that one-on-one around our priorities, and make sure that we set time for that. But then also to make sure that we're not taking up group time for that one-on-one stuff. And we're making sure that we're leveraging, to your point, we're leveraging group time for things that can be efficient in that group setting, so that we're not just repeating the same thing over and over again, that everybody's on the same page, we're aligned and we're moving. And let's go. What I talk to teams and organizations about is this idea of the difference between managing time and investing time. What your garage example just a minute ago is that. Am I managing my time? Meaning I'm saying, okay, what do I have on the calendar and how do I fill the calendar? Versus investing time is saying, what is it that I'm investing in, and how much time am I willing to invest in that? And making sure that then for a project or a particular meeting of some sort, that I got to make sure that how much time am I investing in this? And then I got to make sure that I've got the right people involved and we're focused on the right priority at the right time. And each investment where those things are aligned makes us be more efficient and effective in everything that we do. But it's about that shift of mindset of investing rather than just managing, which is just, okay, well, I got 2 hours. How will we fill it? That's a waste of time.
Yeah. And making sure that people aren't having all these meetings just because they're trying to make sure that people are working, right? Right. They're not just like, show up to this meeting to prove to me that you're really in the office, that kind of, stupid stuff.
There's an epidemic of over meetings, meetings to death in so many different companies, and that the other thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you see this too, is a meeting that just doesn't have a clear focus of what the purpose of the meeting is. And so if I get invited and we're all coming to a meeting that we've come to this, and everybody's looking around saying, hold on, what's the purpose of the meeting? And if we don't have a clear purpose for the meeting, then we shouldn't have called the meeting. But there are many systems, again, that get in the habit of just having this proliferation of meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just, I get sort of what was happening in the beginning. There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and so they were trying to have meetings and reassure people and discuss what's going to happen. And then that just sort of turned into, well, we don't really know what we're supposed to do, so let's just meet all the time. Let's just have these hour-long meetings and we can figure everything out. And what's interesting is, a few years, maybe last year, Inc. magazine did a little feature on us because we've done over 100,000 meetings since 2009 when we went fully remote. And our average meeting for our small meetings is 8 minutes long. So if you ask my people, do you like meetings? They say yes. Are you on meetings a lot? They would say no. But if you look at my staff size and the fact that we've done 100,000, they're on meetings all the time. They just don't feel like they're stuck in meetings all the time.
Yeah.
Because they're just quickly coming together for just 5 people get together for 8 minutes and then they're off.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the idea of a 5-minute favor. I'll do a 5-minute favor for just about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same idea. Can I come together for, it's 8 minutes, but just for a few minutes to to help you and get you unstuck, or to tell you what I know, or to help you do the thing you need to do, and then we're off, right?
Yep. And wouldn't you say, Chris, with that, then the key is, because not everything can be accomplished in 8 minutes, of course, but then of being able to prioritize and say, hey, for that topic, for that particular question, for that particular development, whatever that may be, that we're gonna invest different time outside of that isn't this one, but a different time where we're going to allocate more time, because there's just a deeper discussion, a deeper dive that has to take place. Is that what you're saying too?
Yeah. So what I find is that most things that people need are a 15-minute meeting, and it's going to take them from point A to point B. It's not going to take them from A to Z.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
Well, people try to just have these hour-long meetings and take people from A to Z, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying here is, a lot of the things that get people stuck are, a client called and they need this document, and I don't know what this document is. And so what you could do is start asking everybody, start calling everybody one at a time. Instead, you send a note out in Slack, hey, at 1:00, anyone that knows anything about this document, who can help me, right? And then several people show up to this meeting for 8 minutes and go, oh, you know what? That document has to be made, uniquely every time. Only the CEO or CIO can handle that. It's an accreditation thing. You have to work with, Johnny on that. He's the only one who can help you. Okay, cool. Then I can go book my meeting with Johnny, because I know exactly but several people have helped them navigate that, because the alternative is they did hours and hours of digging and searching on their own, right? They did 4 or 5 one-on-one calls to finally get that information. I mean, that's an entire day for somebody. Yep. Totally unproductive.
Yeah,
so
you're relying on the kind of the wisdom of the crowd and using technology to say, hey, help me find a quicker, faster way to do this. And without and that imagery of going from point A to point B rather than point A to point Z, that's also language I use a lot with clients, of being able to say, hold on, let's make sure, because the common misstep is we think we have to have it all solved right away. And the reality is nothing in the world happens that way. We don't develop as humans. Our culture isn't created at A to Z magically overnight in a 8-minute meeting. But what we do need to identify is what's A to B. And then for those next steps, we will invest time in order to go find it out. But let's focus first on A to B.
Right. And it's, every organization is going to be different. I mean, maybe they need to have 30-minute meetings, but less often. For my group, the way they do their work, it works to just do 15-minute meeting ones all the time. We call them cockroach meetings or ostrich meetings. There's 2 different types of them. And we talk about all in the book, all these different meeting types in the special language of tiger team meetings and tsunami planning meetings, and there's stand-ups. And so, but again, those are creating those signposts I talked about earlier. If I have a stand-up on Monday morning in my sales team, I know I'm coming to tell you what's going on. What am I working on this week? What do I need help with? Right, that kind of stuff. If I call a cockroach meeting later on Monday about this one particular deal I'm working on, well, then people know they're coming to help you with that one thing, right? They don't have to prepare. They don't have to have anything ready. They're just coming to bring you knowledge.
Yep.
Another thing we didn't talk about was that for me, in our organization, a lot of meetings are optional for us. So we set the expectation, these certain meeting types, if you're invited, it is not mandatory for you to come. In fact, if you cannot attend, you just need to decline so people know that you're not going to be there. So that you have the power to invite anybody you want across the organization. There's no hierarchy. If someone thinks that I'm the best person, me and several other people, to be on that call, because I might know, they can invite me. I look at that and go, I'm too busy. I don't have time to be on it. I see that John is on that call. He clearly will know the answer. I don't need to go, right? I can just decline, and it's okay, right? And so giving people the power to say, no, is huge. It's totally huge, right? I mean, how many meetings do you go to where you're like, why was I here? Yeah. Couldn't it just been an email or a Slack message, or could you guys just send me what you decided? Because I didn't need to be here. This was you guys trying to show me you're working, or that you're important, or whatever. Like But
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm fortunate. I don't go to many meetings that aren't like, if I'm at the meeting, then chances are that it's an important thing. I understand what the purpose, and I understand what my purpose is there. So I'm not a good example of that, but I know many different companies where, yes, that some people listening to this is really challenging, and this is going to throw a giant curveball at them, because they're like, wait a second, an 8-minute meeting, 15-minute meeting, wait, hold on a second, how do we do this? How would I just invite all these people? And the reality is, no matter how you're listening to this right now, this is such a great conversation, because again, this is what's happening right now in the world, and over the next year and over the next couple years, these are all the dynamics that teams and organizations are going to be wrestling with as they negotiate. How do we have the in the office experience, the face-to-face? Again, I'll continue to say, to the end of the time, there's always going to be the power in congregating. We're just going to have to get smarter about when that is. And then we're going to have to leverage these kind of remote tools and make sure that we get better about engaging with each other in efficient and effective ways in a remote environment. So all of this stuff that Chris is talking about, these are the things that we're going to be talking about and thinking about within teams and ecosystems over the next couple of years. Chris, I'm wondering, one last question I've got for you before, I know we're getting close to our time here, and I want to be respectful of that, because that's what we're talking about here. And I so appreciate you jumping on and having this really great, engaging conversation. But what leadership tips would you have for team leads, heads of companies, heads of departments that are wrestling with their employees are looking at them and they're trying to figure out that transition back to work? Some people really eager to get back into the office, other people really eager to stay remote. What advice would you have for anybody out there who's having to kind of navigate those conversations with people that might fall on both sides of it?
I think that the future of work is flexibility. And so that flexibility is, employee 1 wants to be in the office all the time, and employee 2 wants to come in twice a week, and employee 3 wants to pretty much never come in, right? Unless it's something really special. The more flexibility we can allow, and flexibility also is a really interesting concept when we think about undoing the idea, the old industrial revolution / legal compliance view of the world, which is, I have to treat everyone exactly the same, right? Everyone has to have the exact same experience and have the same this and the same that. That can never happen. What you need to do is treat people fairly, right? And give people a fair sort of swipe at their work. So if it makes sense, and, is it fair that someone who has 4 kids has to get a babysitter and, can't ever pick their kids up from school? Or is that fair just because someone, you can go into this whole equality thing into a place that just doesn't work. So we've always taken the approach, can we be fair to our people and make good decisions on a case-by-case basis that make sense, that we're happy to make again? If we get the same type of employee again, we would make those same decisions again, right? It's not this one person gets special treatment that no one else could ever get. But that allows us to really work with our people and what's best for them. And I think that's where the future of work really is headed. That's why remote work is so valuable. You can get talent anywhere in the world. You can get talent that wouldn't otherwise ever be able to work for you in a traditional office. Think of single parents. Think of people who have young children, people who are taking care of a sick spouse or family member, people who are physically disabled. We know a lot of spouses of military members have a very hard time getting hired because people know if they get stationed somewhere else and they have to move, then they're going to lose them. And so they tend not to. We started a whole program. Military spouses, come on and work for us because we don't care where you move.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You get stationed somewhere, have fun.
Yeah.
Come and do this job. Yeah. Right. Take a couple days while you get your move on, and then get your laptop set up on your new desk in your new place and start working. And so, we were able to take advantage of that. But companies need to think about that. The last thing that companies, I think, are not thinking about yet, if they are hopefully thinking about they might lose their talent if they don't offer this. That's the big one. But the second one is there's a lot of employees that, regardless of their view on remote work, they do not want to be in an office yet because they do not trust their fellow employee. They don't trust that they got the vaccine. They don't trust that they're going to wash their hands. They don't trust that they're going to have good hygiene and continue to do things that will keep people safe. We've all worked in offices with someone who sneezes, it doesn't cover their face, that doesn't do anything. You clearly left the bathroom, it didn't wash their hands. And we know it's gross, but like for some reason we never said anything. And like now, can you imagine being back in and like those decisions aren't just going to make you sick, they might kill you. And so there are people who are just not ready for that. And so they may never be ready for that. And so they may choose remote work. And if that's one of your top people, you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, so, there's no doubt. There is again, intentional culture shaping and the strategy around how you're continuing to engage your workforce and being able to see how do we continue to, again, attract, retain, develop, and help people be in the best environment for them that helps them bring their best work to the surface. Those conversations and that, we are entering, we're already in, but we're certainly going to be going deeper here soon. And so you're absolutely right. Those kinds of conversations, if you aren't already having them, they are coming soon. So, hey, Chris, this is awesome. I appreciate, and again, super excited for you and happy for you about the book. The book launches again tomorrow. Check out chrisdyer.com. Check out the show notes. We'll put that in there also so you can check that out. Also, I have 5 copies that I'm giving. I have more copies of that than that I'm doing stuff with, but I've got 5 copies for listeners. If you email info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com, and mention the remote work book, I will make sure to get you a free copy that is just a support to Chris and the launch of his book. So Chris, again, thanks for joining me today and coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And thank you for all the work you're doing around culture. And I appreciate you being on my show as well. It's always been a great interview when you've been there.
Hey, my pleasure. And I've heard great things about Kim, by the way. Kim, if you're listening to this, I've heard great things about you. I've never met Kim, but heard great things. So she played a big role in this book as well. So I know that it's going to be great, and I look forward to reading it. So thanks again to everybody out there. Again, I'm convinced of this, more convinced than ever, that the future of leadership, this is all about making sure that we are redefining and reclarifying what does authentic leadership look like in the world today. How do we think about engaging people in person, remotely? The culture that we are creating is intentional, and we are going to have to recalibrate the thermostat, because the temperature that we set, teams and organizations are going to continue to have to make sure that we are bringing those words, those values, those posters off of the wall and into our people, whether we are physically in the same space together in the power of congregation, or we are doing it remotely and still staying engaged with everything that we do. So thank you for everybody who's listening. I hope you will stay tuned to future episodes. Check out the show notes from today. Stay connected at Jason V. Barger on social media, and thank you. And wherever you are today, I hope this has been a great part of your day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us, be a thermostat.